Near the Ural Mountains of Russia, 1100 miles east of Moscow, lies Yekaterinburg, Russia's fourth largest city. Beneath this idyllic city lies a hidden past that was covered up for decades. Traveled back 45 years ago, and things were much different. In the 70s, Yekaterinburg went by another name, Sverdlovsk, and was under the control of the Soviet Union. It was the middle of the Cold War, and the city had become a massive factory for the ussr's military-industrial complex. The first indication that something had gone terribly wrong was on April 4, 1979, when Margarita Ilyenko, the medical officer at a nearby hospital, got a call from another doctor. For the previous few days, the hospital was getting patients complaining about fever, chest pain, and difficulty breathing. But this doctor had just made a startling diagnosis: inhalation anthrax. It was the deadliest form of the disease. Even with heavy antibiotics, the mortality rate was 50%. That's like flipping a coin if you'd live or die. Even worse, the mortality rate skyrockets to 90% when no treatments are given. 2 of their patients had already died, and they did not know it yet, but more would follow. The next day, 5 people would die at her hospital, and a flood of new patients came in. The stream of sick patients and deaths from the disease would continue for days. Most people know of the Chernobyl accident, where a nuclear reactor exploded, melted down, and sent radioactive material out for thousands of miles. However, most people don't know what is often called the biological Chernobyl, but it happened here in Sverdlovsk in a facility called Compound 19. This is the story of the worst anthrax lab leak in history. I hope you stay for the entire video, because knowing what happened here gives us the power to understand the risks these labs pose and if enough is being done to mitigate the risk. An informed public is a powerful public. After watching, if you enjoyed this video, found it educational, or just want to spread joy in the world, I would love it if you hit the like button and subscribe, because this allows the video to spread to more people. Thank you. Leave a comment if you have any thoughts about the incident, or if you want to propose another video topic. Once inhalation anthrax was diagnosed, the communist government knew it had come from Compound 19. The facility's mission was development and production of weaponized diseases, but mainly of inhalation anthrax. They had created a version that was far more infectious than the naturally occurring one. To the government, so many infections in such a small time made it clear to them what happened: a release of weaponized spores. They sprung to action to cover up the truth, even to their own citizens. In 1972, the USSR had signed a treaty to ban all bioweapons, so they were terrified that the international community would find out they had violated the treaty. The cover-up was more important to the USSR than treating and mitigating the existing problem. Authorities devised a story to cover up the accident and claimed the anthrax was due to contaminated black market meat. They spread warnings to the population not to eat the meat and arrested butchers selling it. Deaths would be covered up by changing death certificates, and doctors who knew the truth were intimidated into not refuting the party line. They did perform some cleanup acts, like wipe the hospital with chlorine, shoot stray animals, and wash the streets with fire hoses. However, this may have made things worse, as it kicked up spores again. The USSR claimed 100 people had become infected and 65 died, although many believe the actual numbers are much higher. By late 1979, Western newspapers would claim the flurry of anthrax infections near Sverdlovsk was due to a bioweapon accident. For years, the USSR held steadfast with their cover-up and claimed contaminated meat was a source. To prove their claim, in 1988, they allowed a Western scientist to come to Moscow to interview health officials and review death records. But these were manipulated to uphold the contaminated meat cover story. Then, the truth started to leak out like spores from a factory. In 1991, the Soviet Union had collapsed and the stranglehold on the truth was loosened. The following year, Ken Eliebeck, deputy director of Bioweapons and a Soviet colonel, defected to the UK. He revealed that the anthrax incident at Sverdlovsk was a leak at Compound 19. The same year, Boris Yeltsin, president of Russia and Sverdlovsk party chair during the incident, confirmed the existence of the bioweapons program and the accidental release of weapons-grade anthrax. Western scientists would perform their own investigation on site and confirmed an accident had caused the incident. Soon, details of the accident became known to the Western world. On April 2, 1979, 2 days before Margarita got the call that inhalation anthrax had been diagnosed, the accident occurred. Compound 19's origin started during World War II. Soviet soldiers had captured Japanese scientists, as well as blueprints for a bioweapons lab. The scientists were a part of Unit 731, which conducted lethal human experimentation and biological weapons manufacturing. The things they did were incredibly horrible and included disease injections, controlled dehydration, biological and standard weapons testing, vivisection, amputation, and others. Bringing light to Unit 731 would empower us to never allow it to happen again. If you're interested in a video on this, let me know in the comments. Like many Soviet creations, basic safety was not top on the list of priorities. Both the production of anthrax and Compound 19's location had major safety issues. The facility was built and located on the southern side of Sverdlovsk, which had 1.2 million people and was strategically placed to hide its purpose. The USSR was hoping no foreign governments would think they would be reckless enough to put a dangerous bioweapons lab near a populated area and endanger hundreds of thousands of lives. But the USSR was, and the leak occurred and nearly brought devastation to the city. Part of the anthrax production process required using a single filter to remove the anthrax spores from air vented outdoors. There was no backup filter system. In early April, a worker noticed that the filter was broken. He removed it and left a note to have the next shift replace the filter, but that never happened. The next day, a tiny bit of these weaponized spores made their way out of the factory. The wind drove the spores to the southeast, away from the city center, in the shape of a cone that extended for 30 miles. It contaminated roads, a ceramic factory, parks, and homes. Because the wind pushed the spores away from the city center, disaster was averted. If it hadn't, the deaths could have been in the tens or hundreds of thousands, even though only a few milligrams of anthrax were released before the error was found and venting stopped. Much like Chernobyl, things could have been much worse. This story demonstrates the willingness of those in power to endanger you for their own goals and to keep power. To get a strategic advantage, or some would say to catch up, in the Cold War, the Soviet Union skirted their international commitment to uphold the bioweapons ban. It makes you question what other treaties are being broken worldwide even today. They placed a dangerous bioweapons facility near a heavily populated area and had lax safety protocols. When the accident happened, they focused on the cover-up more than cleaning procedures to protect themselves from international condemnation. Only through blind luck, tens or hundreds of thousands of more deaths were averted. The USSR is not the only one who did this. Anyone knowledgeable about the topic knows better, but it was one of the many offenders. For more on lab leaks, check this video here. Click that subscribe button to get more stories when real life is crazier than fiction.